If you've seen my channel for a while, it's no secret that I like SAO. I've played quite a few of the games on my channel, and even though I've rolled my eyes at some of its ridiculousness and have my criticisms about the games and the anime itself, I still enjoy it. I am among those that feel that Kirito's character development feels disjointed, and while I do acknowledge that mental health does not take a linear path, the problem seems to inherently come from the fact that SAO stops telling the story from Kirito's perspective, in between the loss of Sachi and the start of Kirito and Asuna's romance. So there's something of a void there, and the story takes a different direction that seems to just ignore the traumas attached to the beginning of the series. I'm not part of the group that complains that they feel slighted by not seeing the group make it to the top floor, because I never believed that that was what the series was about. To me, it was about how these characters adapted to their situation being put in a game that essentially operates as an alternative to real life. You die in the game, you die. It's no longer for fun, but simultaneously, it's no different than simply living your life in another universe. And that's an interesting psychology to explore. And while I do see the series take the path of those that have adjusted to this mindset, there's still this expectation for an emotional climax that feels largely subverted. So clearly, I understand that there are problems with the show. I get that. But I love it in spite of those problems, because even when a series doesn't go the direction you expect, it can still fill a need you didn't know you had. All that being said, I guess I can finally segue to the reason you clicked on this video. You see, I actually like the Fairy Dance arc. I'm not sure if it's necessarily my favorite, but it's the arc I've rewatched the most, so it's safe to say it's definitely one of my favorites. At this point, my guess is you're eager to either try to understand the perspective of someone who likes the trashy season, or you're in the minority and you're looking for some confirmation bias. But regardless of which you are, I might like it for different reasons than you're expecting. So first is the more superficial reason: comfort. Of all the season's story arcs, this is the easiest to get comfortable and just watch, with no burden attached to it. Season 3 and 4 are much more intense. Regardless of how you feel about the show's attempt at maturity by this point, it's easy to agree that these seasons are far from relaxing. Mother's Rosaria features Asuna, and I love the journey she takes, and I absolutely adore my little destroyer of worlds, Yuki. Sorry, that's an inside joke. But I don't see myself, on purpose, watching something that breaks my heart for comfort. Referencing Yuki is like a cheat code to make me cry, and it's used sparingly enough that I appreciate it. So what about Phantom Bullet or the OG Aincrad arc? Well, as I've stated, there's a disconnect I feel in the first arc. I definitely enjoy revisiting it, but I wouldn't say it's my favorite. And while I like Sinon, I think she's a really cool character, Phantom Bullet falls to the side because of the second reason, which I'll get into a bit later. So I'd say the Fairy Dance arc is the easiest arc to relax to during a rewatch. It definitely has stakes, but the stakes are really straightforward. There's no real fear of death, and it's interesting to see Kirito push himself so hard so consistently throughout the whole thing and face failure. Barring the Underworld arc, I feel more connected to Kirito here than the other ones. There's a very clear goal and a very emotional journey, and even though the narrative trades perspectives, they work together instead of making the experience feel off, only for you to understand later in retrospect what was bothering you. So yeah, on the most superficial level, I enjoy the arc because it's safe. At the end of the story, everyone is fine and comes out unscathed. There's no threat of dying, I don't have to watch a character I get attached to dying, and I don't have to worry about emotional trauma attached to the plot. So yeah, it's pretty tame, very safe, and I can see the reasons I've outlined as the same ones no one else likes it, or at most enjoys it the least. It's a story about Kirito trying to wake up the love of his life by reaching her consciousness within a game. And it's also a story about Suguha. And this is where we get to the second reason I love the Fairy Dance arc, and perhaps the most complicated one to explain. Emotional resonance. In our lives, we all have our own reasons for sentimental attachment towards something. Fans have headcanons, we all have our differing ships. Essentially, we all enjoy our fandoms in different ways. I even have a personal story about s'mores that would surprise you at how impactful it shaped my life. And that's the beautiful thing about media. We can all like the same thing, but for different reasons, and that reason relates to how it resonates with us on a personal level. I like Suguha. I also very much relate to Suguha. She has a routine and her duties, but underneath all of that, she has a yearning for freedom that she absolutely falls in love with. And as a hopeless romantic, she also has a very naive view of love. And that's something that I can understand because growing up, I also had a naive understanding of love. To me, Suguha represents the unapologetic desire to believe in romance. Suguha also represents the difficulties that can be attached to having affections towards someone else, especially if that person cannot return them. Of course, my reasons and Suguha's reasons for that last part differ a little, but I view her plight sympathetically. Even without the impulse for romantic love in the way, Suguha grew up deprived of familial love, and while we could armchair psychoanalyze her strong desire to be close to her assumed sibling becoming the catalyst that eventually gets her wires crossed and misconstrued labels and feelings in a way that complicates boundaries, let's just leave her affection at face value for now. Because the one thing that I don't think Suguha gets enough credit for is realizing that her feelings are not appropriate. She cares very strongly for Kazuto, and upon learning that he's adopted, she allows that affection to mutate beyond acceptable boundaries. And what's worse is she has no one to vent to about these feelings. She hides them out of shame and deals with the burden internally. I'm not a licensed therapist, but nothing good ever comes from not being able to sort your feelings. And when you feel you have to do it alone, it makes the journey worse, and eventually makes feelings of guilt associated being a cyclical hell of emotional torture. So, Suguha has feelings for Kazuto. She isn't sure what those feelings actually are, but she's almost certain they are romantic. And because those feelings are romantic, they are forbidden. Coupled with being deprived of even platonic or familial love for the same exact person, she continues to associate her jealousy towards Asuna as that of romantic origin. She just wants that bond back with a person who matters most to her, and she isn't quite sure how to express it because she's afraid that it's too much. So she makes do with what little she can get. And I think another thing people don't truly appreciate is that Suguha tries to move on. It's not healthy, of course, to just fixate on someone the moment you meet them, but after a while of getting to know Kirito, Suguha feels that she can finally let go of the strange and inappropriate feelings she harbors for Kazuto. She does grieve, as we all do, and for some of us, we absolutely do grieve to the person we like. It seems so easy to tell someone we have feelings for the problems we have with having feelings for someone, especially when it doesn't work out. It's hard to explain why someone like me or Suguha does this, but it's a form of opening up that makes us feel closer, and like there's hope that the other person becomes even closer to us because of it. Again, I'll admit it's probably not healthy, but that's why her struggle is relatable. In the end, the most cruel, dramatic irony takes place. Suguha learns that Kirito, the boy she's fallen for, is in fact Kazuto, and her world falls apart once more because now she knows for sure she actually has fallen in love with her brother, but without the guidelines that enforce a familial connection between them, there was no barrier that prevented her from naturally falling for someone who had traits she desired. And in her despair, in her embarrassment, she logs off and grieves once more. I don't know how many people watch the dub. I do. And say what you will about the dub, but Cassandra Lee Morris's performance in this scene is something I can never forget.
I wouldn't have realized how I felt about you. I wouldn't have felt sad and jealous when I found out about her. And I wouldn't have tried forgetting about you and falling in love with Kirito instead!
There is something so powerful about how the emotion of the delivery is like a slow boil, but like as if that boil was being held in by a cap. The intensity cannot be contained and just spikes up at the last minute. The sheer, raw intensity of this very honest moment where it all comes to a head is one that I feel in my very soul. And that is why I resonate so strongly with Suguha. There's this immaturity in her view of love, and this hopelessness attached to it that I understand very intimately. All the times I have had crushes and been rejected, all the times I subsequently tried to hide having feelings for someone only to have it blow up in my face, all that immaturity and vague understanding of what love actually is, I went through that, and it is so easy to see myself in Suguha. It feels real to me. It feels like I am her, and I'm experiencing all that all over again. And I want to watch her grow and get what she wants more than anything else. Because knowing she is happy is enough to make me happy. Because in the end, all I ever want for myself is to be happy. And seeing that in someone similar means that there's hope out there. And even though I have a better understanding of what a healthy, loving relationship is, there's still a part of me that indulges in the fleeting fantasy of romance in media. Something raw and heartfelt that wants something so badly, so unapologetically, and eventually becomes rewarded by never losing hope that it was always within their grasp. Perhaps I'm a hopeless romantic, but I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with wanting to be loved or daydreaming about romance. So long as you treat your eventual partner like a person and not an ideal, and commit to each other by meeting halfway, but each giving it 100%, I think you'll do just fine. The romance and the fairy tales have room to coexist. And that is why I enjoy the fairy dance arc. It's a comfort to that young, naive version of me that hopes that I can find romance, and shares the pain of one Suguha Kirigaya as she explores the complexities of her own feelings. So, I hope that what you take away from this is that we all have our own reasons for liking things, and I think that for our own reasons, however flawed they may be, are valid in their own right. We all have our own lived experiences, and how media resonates with us will all be a little different. This may not be the answer a lot of fans to this arc were looking for. Perhaps they were hoping for some justification in the writing, or validation from a film critic's perspective. However, the reasons are very much personal ones that have no bearing on how well crafted the story is, aside from one aspect. But because of that, it genuinely doesn't matter what opinion the haters of this arc may hold either, because my reasoning transcends their criticism, illogical as it may be. But that's where this video ends. This probably won't be my most well-received video, considering how bizarrely personal the subject matter is, but I hope if you've made it this far, you're also thinking about a story arc that you find to be your favorite for equally unconventional reasons. We all have a story to tell, and stories we relate to on a personal level. I'm curious just how many stories like mine are out there. But with all that said, I'd like to thank you for watching and wish you all a happy SAO day.